Hello, everyone. Welcome to Love, Sex, and Leadership. My name is Aaron Kleinerman. I'm very excited and inspired to have on the show today Raffaello, who's a co-teacher of mine with ISTA and is one of the more lead faculty there, and been a man in Tantra for many years. We've known each other on this path for a while, and it's always a joy and inspiration to have catch-ups along the way and just to hear and to feel his journey into both leadership, love, and sexuality, three topics that's really most alive in this podcast. So welcome to the show, Rafa.
Thanks, Aaron. It's really, yeah, I agree with everything you said. It's really good to see you and the different ways that we've met along the path, so to speak. And congratulations on this beautiful podcast that you have. It's exciting to be here. Thanks for having me.
Ah, thank you. Thank you. Nice to have you here, brother. So I'd love to just start, as a people that maybe don't know you, or just a little background in terms of not necessarily your whole story, but what's the why that has driven you into the turning moments of your life that kind of has inspired you to show up in service as a mentor, as a leader, as a facilitator, as someone who is kind of weaving and edging into sometimes a challenging field. But what's the why that kind of drives you and has been the momentum along the way to the years?
At the core, I am a practical philosopher. That's what I
Mm,
really am, in the deepest layers. So I yearn like burningly for an embodied practical understanding of everything.
mm,
So that means I am driven by a burning desire to understand life, to understand sex, to understand power, to understand money, to understand relationships, to understand humanness. And in different parts of my life, my desire has been oriented in different ways. But at the end of the day, everything I've done is very selfish. Yes, you say show up in service, which is true, but the drive is for me to understand and for me to come to the end of this incarnation with a sense that even though I haven't understood everything, but I tried and I did my best to not just cruise along, but to really actually understand. And I want to repeat, I don't mean understand with my mind. I mean understand as, there is this beautiful Thai, the verb to say understand is to enter the heart. So when something
mm,
enters the heart, that's when it's understood. And my deep yearning has always been for life to enter my heart. And I
mm,
realized that I had to do something about it. It wasn't just gonna happen, I had to make an effort, and so here I
mhm,
am.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I guess in that entering of the heart, in your studies and in the path along the way, I mean, I know you've been in this field of tantra for a while. Do you feel like there's any other path that really incorporates both the embodied understanding as well as the mental understanding woven together? And what's been your experience with both taking what is more conceptually concepts and pieces that a lot of philosophy likes to really comprehend intellectually and taking that into the body, and maybe some challenges that you've had along the way with that?
Yeah, so the first thing is that philosophy only became intellectual really recently, more or less, like people like to pin it on Descartes, the French philosopher. But philosophy really means love of wisdom. So there is an emotional component even in the word itself. And then from that perspective, to answer your question, how many paths are there today that combine the mind, the emotions, the body, and the spiritual part of a human being that engage all of them? I don't know of that many, to be honest. Like,
Mm,
for me, it was quote unquote tantra. Maybe could have been some very deep form of theater or dance. I do suspect that there are in those feels like some masters or groups, that bring it so much deeper than just the practical aspect of all those disciplines. But at the end of the day, it all comes back to embodied spirituality, really. Like whether we want to call it more tantra or neo tantra, but that's what it is. It's an understanding of life, which is not everyone's understanding of life, where you basically say, okay, so my mind, my sexuality, my emotions, my spiritual self are all part of this journey that I'm on, and all of them need to be met by whatever I do. And it's it's a very high aspiration, and it's not for everybody, and not everybody likes it. And particularly nowadays, organized religions have a very different take on what it is to be a human and what it is to be on a spiritual journey. But very early on, you could say in my early 20s, I made my choice that essentially there are only two paths. One is the embodied spirituality, and the other one is the disembodied spirituality. And so I made my choice, and that's it. That's where I am 25 years later, pretty much.
Yeah, great. Love that. And you speak into this embodied spirituality, and obviously in this world that we both teach in, sexuality is a live component of that. And yet, philosophically, historically, that these are pieces, of course, that have been woven in through space and time. And if we look at, sexuality as woven together into spirituality now, there's a lot of there's a lot of area for challenge, for gray area, for discontinuity, for people's projections and blames and things into a field that's actually just embodied spirituality, if I'll take you back to what you just shared. So where do you feel like either we've gone wrong as a humanity, or where the turning point where suddenly sexuality became this thing away from embodied wisdom? Sexuality became this thing of like, oh, let's put it behind the closed doors. Let's not deal with it anymore. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this from more of a philosophical framework.
Yes, absolutely. It's not only sexuality. Sexuality is the part of embodiment that it's the easiest to sort of like, it's like the tip of the iceberg. But you're absolutely right. In the course of human evolution, there were some turning points where not only sexuality, but also the body in general, emotions, went out, were sort of like put out of the high chambers of spirituality. When did that happen? Well, the best map that I have, and these are all maps, so the map is not the territory, but the best maps that I know situate that turning point more or less along the time that humans became agricultural from being largely nomadic. That happened around 10,000 years ago. Like, this is very approximate figures that I'm giving. So that was like the first seed, and all the changes that happened with becoming agricultural have a lot to do with possessing nature. For the first time, human beings felt that they could possess nature, and instead of just relate to nature and having their gifts in a mutual exchange, now all of a sudden they could control the crops. So that's a huge turning point. After controlling the crops, it became time to control the animals, which is a huge shift if you think about it. The fact that humans could now have livestock, they could have animals that were essentially used for our own consumption and our own benefit. That created a profound shift. And then, of course, controlling other humans, particularly women and offspring at the beginning, but also, other men. So that both created and was the result of a profound spiritual transition that, to put it in a very simple way, was the transition from a mainly maternal, feminine, goddess-based spirituality to a new emerging male dominant spirituality. And I want to be clear that, when we look at that, it's very easy to say, oh gosh, that was terrible and violent, and the male energy took over and raped and pillaged. But it's way deeper than that. In many ways, it was a phase of evolution that needed to happen, but still it was violent and full of suffering. So as a result of that, now, a few thousands years later, and particularly after the advent of monotheistic Abrahamic religions like Judaism and Christianity and Islam, we pretty much fully are immersed. We don't even notice it. We are immersed in a spiritual context that is not only patriarchal, but deeply ascetic, as in deeply based in renunciation of the body, renunciation of sexuality, renunciation of matter, renunciation of nature, and with all the consequences that that has.
Yeah. As you're sharing, you remind me of a book I read quite a while back called Sex at Dawn, which I'm sure you've come across. And
Yes.
I've actually just recently been listening to it again the last year or so. And it was just a strong reminder of that evolutionary time of where, we really have shifted out of you could say the hunter-gatherer into this more ownership model. And I'm curious in your perspective on this, because I see a lot of people in the ascendant journey, the aesthetic path that, I know I was there at a certain time where it's like finding God in the ascension, in the out of body. And what very much led me into the path of Tantra was recognizing, okay, I want to find divinity inside these cells. I want to find something beyond just, leaving the body to find God. And I guess the question in that is in this aesthetic path, or maybe people that you've come across, or more in the yogic traditions, do you feel like people who are there, who are very much on this, let me find God only through ascension, do you feel like there's some part of them that's kind of, missing the buck, and they're gonna, have to come back to the next lifetime to find the embodied, divinity? Or do you feel like it's actually, just exactly where their soul's meant to be? I'm curious of this sometimes. I don't like to compare like, oh, I'm on a better path or something like that. It feels more accurate and true to me. And of course, someone who's on that path of kind of denying the body, in a sense, feels true to them. But where do you feel like they level up? Where do you feel like they range in this place of our, sacred, inherent divinity?
Like every big fork on the road, like this is a big one. We're talking like really deep stuff. It's impossible to eliminate that fork. It's impossible to really say, that is the right path, like my path, the embodied path is the right one. But from my perspective, yes, of course, being on the aesthetic path means missing out on a very important aspect of existence. But I could totally see how whoever has been dedicated to a bona fide ascetic path could say the same about me. Like being on the embodied path means losing time and sort of like getting mired, in the trappings of something that's just a distraction, because matter to them is a distraction, and relationships are a distraction, and sexuality is the uber distraction. So why would you spend time on that when actually that's just holding you back? And so you can't really reconcile these 2 points, because at the core of it, there is a different worldview. There is a different view of the world. There is a different view specifically of matter, of nature, of the body. And it's so crazy, because I can relate to you about having been on the aesthetic path before, and I still am very curious and very interested. And sometimes I'll read, some texts from Buddhism, which I enjoy at times, or even from Christianity and other, ascetic spiritualities. And then a part of me just cringes, because what they say about the body is so antagonistic, just like essentially we're sacks of pus and gases, and can't wait to be freed of that. But does that attitude towards the body, is that attitude towards the body only bad, like only sort of like diminishing the human spirit. It's not. It also allows people to do great things because of the disregard they have for their own personal safety and their own, needs, like material needs. So it's really two points of view that cannot be easily reconciled, and that's why I call it a sort of like a heartbreaking choice. The choice of one's own spiritual path basically also means the active renunciation of the other path, and that's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and I guess in that choice, if you look at the place of spirituality on a global platform, those that are less on the embodied, path that's dealing with sexuality, often I observe, and I know you observe us both being in a kind of proactive mystery school that kind of is on an edging gap for people in their lives to kind of stir things up a little bit. There's often a lot of sensationalism around sexuality because it's not the aesthetic path, because it's not going to church every Sunday to find Jesus. It's actually finding that inside. So and I know for yourself, you were with Agama for a little while, and that's had some sensationalism around it. And I'd love to just hear more on a broader spectrum, then we get to the more specifics, but how to most effectively not buy into this sensationalism that gets pushed around sexuality, which is the drama and the what sells in the media, but to actually like hold a current of presence and truth to the recognition that what this sexuality piece is doing is actually helping, in my perspective, helping people break through. So how to navigate this most effectively to not lose the essence of knowing divinity, but to still be a pillar of truth in embodied spirituality that deals with sexuality.
Very good question, and also very timely, because as we are recording this, just about 2 days ago, there was another article on the press about the school that we both are connected to, and it wasn't very flattering at all, and in a way, that can be shocking, but also, as you say right now, it is something to be expected. And so I want to, give an answer. My answer is not just theoretical. This is where I have, of course, a lot of skin in the game, and where I can also feel and see my own projections and my own shortcomings in dealing with collective consciousness. Because what you're talking about, the distortions, the press, this and that, at the end of the day, that's nothing more and nothing less than a difficult relationship between today's modern schools of embodied spirituality that include as well sexuality in their explorations, and the more general collective consciousness as manifested, for instance, by the press or by the public opinion or by the common sense, however we want to look at it. And that's not going to be an easy relationship, and we all know that, those of us who work in this field, for a number of reasons. One, because as I shared before, like, we're really coming from thousands of years of conditioning around sexuality, the body, and emotions, and it's so ubiquitous that it's difficult to even realize it. But it's very easy for me to give some sort of like shock examples. Like, what would any of us feel, even you and I? Maybe not you and I, but like even like the most progressive person in the room, or the most sort of like open-minded, that's what I mean. What would they feel if their leader of choice started speaking about their sexual life? Like, almost everybody would feel like a contraction and an ick, like, why do I need to hear this? Too much information. Stop. So we're not, as humanity, we're not really there. We're not able to integrate the fact that someone can be in leadership or doing something of impact in the world and still have a sexual life, which everybody does, of course, but we just don't want to know about it. So that's one aspect of the conundrum. The other aspect that's sometimes more difficult for people like me to admit and to own is that, because of a number of reasons, it is also true that choosing to be in the embodied spirituality camp, so to speak, means also dealing with a lot of our own shit, basically my own, my own distortions, my own shadows, and those of the people that I co-create with. So it's not that the public opinion's outrage at what we do, at the ceremonies that we hold, is partly, frankly, just bigotry, like dressed in many different ways. And part of it is also a pointer that sometimes we don't know what we're doing. Sometimes we don't know very well what we're doing, because we're sort of like exploring and making it up and dealing with our own shortcomings and shadows without a lot of manual for that. When you choose the camp, so to speak, of embodied spirituality, then one of the, for me, beautiful things that happen is that the path of purity, like the ascetic path of purity and purifying by elimination, gets completely turned on its head, so to speak, and it becomes the path of wholeness. And wholeness is very different from purity. Wholeness means embracing it all, and it's going to be messy, and it's going to be also a very tough mirror, but a very honest mirror on where we are at. So there isn't anymore the possibility to just dress in white and say I'm so pure, I'm so elevated, and maybe I tried really, really hard for 25 years and I actually did become pure and elevated. Some people can do that, but for us in this camp, spiritual camp, that's not an option anymore, because we are based on a value of embracing not just sexuality, not just emotions, not just the body, but also the shadow. And embracing it doesn't mean letting it free reign and letting it ride the car, but it means making space for it. So it is complex, it is beautiful, it is heartbreaking at times, and there's nowhere else I would love to be but here.
I love that. Yeah, and I want to also acknowledge your role inside of ISTA is a lot more dealing with all these conversations, and I've been supporting the best I can in kind of my faculty position, but I really appreciate what I've witnessed inside of this organization the last, especially 3 years, where things were ruffled up, things came up, past you could say cobwebs arriving to the surface, and what both you and I have seen with a lot of other organizations have just pushed things down, and it's really actually been a very proactive place inside of our this school, this kind of educationary platform, transformational space that has said, hey, we're actually going to look at this, we're going to confront this. There's enough here, of course, that we're going to confront it, and there's juice here for our growth. And I want to acknowledge what I've witnessed from your side, of course, dealing with many different projections and thoughts and ideas being thrown at you, a certain steadfast direction of love and presence that I've witnessed inside of it. That's been beautiful. I haven't had a chance to share that with you, but I think it's honorary, especially in a field that is normally, when these things arise, they just get pushed under the rug, and the guru, if you will, rises. And it's like, actually, it's the thing I've loved the most about being part of ISTA from the get-go. It's like, let's put our own shadows out there on the table, and people are going to eat them up and destroy them, and have a lot of thoughts and ideas on them. And yet the point of power that holds is very revolutionary. And I think that's one of the things that I know for myself, why I keep saying yes to it. And I haven't, I tried the aesthetic path. It worked for a little while, but then it didn't work. I'm sure you can relate.
Thank you. I can relate, and also I take your reflection with gratitude. And yes, indeed, for sure. I know in the deep of my heart that myself and many others, and this is the thing that really I drink from, in a sense, that we are operating from a good heart, from an honest heart. Let's put it more this way, good or bad, who knows, but from an honest heart, that there isn't a place of trickery here. There isn't a place of trying to navigate this to the best of our convenience. And when those self-serving mechanisms get actually pointed out, because some of them are there, it's a revelation. It's like, oh wow, yeah, wait a minute, maybe actually what I was doing was secretly serving my own advantage. Wow, I really need to look into that. And we've been doing this, for as you say, for quite some time. And there is a sense of sweetness and peace, just peace in it. I think this is the reason why myself and many others that I know, while we of course feel touched and sometimes affected, by the latest article that comes out saying that what we do is crazy and how could that even be possible, but still, really deep inside, there is a sense of peace. There is a sense of alignment with my own consciousness, if I take it personally to myself, that allows me to meet these challenges, but without collapsing in guilt or shame, or feeling like, oh my gosh, like it's fine, it's okay. Life is like this, and I'd much rather have challenges coming that can show me where I wasn't aware and wasn't present, than surf a path that's just going to accommodate to my shadows and my little trickeries, and then 40 years later I am unchanged. So
Mm-hmm.
I can say that I've been through these fires a few times, as have many of us and yourself, and it changes us, and it's beautiful. It's not always
Mm-hmm.
comfortable, but
Mm-hmm.
it is a process that is very alchemical. So thank you for seeing that, and again, I am happy to be where I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I just the piece, the overarching theme that's alive for me when I look at this in the sacred sexuality field, and also just the collective as a whole, is where I feel like there's a multi-billion-dollar industry in our world that feeds a drama triangle and feeds a place of keeping people as victims of circumstance, victims of life, of work, of relationship, of all these different pieces, to, in essence, kind of feed a consumerism of things. And when you have a sensationalism of sexuality feeding into the victim mentality that actually doesn't let someone break free and know God, but keeps them in a certain condensed framework of life, how do you feel like both this field as well as the work we're doing, and you can relate this more into a collective, but how do we create more freedom for people away from the sensationalism of maintaining a victim consumerism kind of philosophy and framework? Just so much of what we're sold, of what we're marketed, of what we're showed on everywhere we go is like, oh, you're a victim of this, of this, of that, all. And it's like, oh, you need this pill, you need this antidote, you need this. What's your problem? I have your solution. And it's like this marketing 101 is built on that in a sense, and yet there isn't an embodied freedom that can come with that. So how do we move with that? How do we actually not die into the sensationalism that wants to pull in the victim, but actually help people break free into a new reality?
How do we do it? Great question. And as you know, this is a lot of what we try to do in the embodied containers and retreats that we hold. People think it's all about like having sex, with this and that person, and some kind of, lusty time, post work time. Let's go for a week, to have some lustful. It's so much not that. It is really navigating a container where these dynamics will come up, which is good. The victim, persecutor, savior, rescuer dynamic will show up in holographically in those week-long retreats or containers. So then, okay, then what do we do with that? And we have tools, actually. We have developed over the years tools and frameworks that can support that. For instance, there's like a very simple one that, however, it's not going to be easy to implement for the majority of the population, I believe, unless they do some radical shifts. And that would be something like feel the feelings and drop the opinion that you have about XYZ.
Mm.
So it's such a
Mm-hmm.
fine line, but it's such a beautiful shift. all of us can feel victimized, right? All of us can feel in different contexts that this is unfair. What's happening to me is unfair. There is a big misconception that we in ISTA or other schools want to sort of like erase that feeling. You can't feel like everything is unfair, is wrong. Don't feel that. Always feel positive. No, that's not what we're doing. But feeling the feelings properly with appropriate tools, and especially in community, not alone by yourself, but in a group, oftentimes leads to just then after to a feeling of liberation. It's like, I felt it, I screamed at God, it's unfair, why are you doing this to me? Oh, now if I'm really honest, I feel alive, I feel powerful, I feel ready to go out and do what I need to do. Oh, wait, no, that's not possible. I'm supposed to feel terrible because I have to put a complaint to the XYZ department, and if they see me shining, they're not going to believe me, right? They're not going to say, no, we're not going to give you the reimbursement. So, fuck, wait, let me feel, let me just, again, feel like contracted and terribly sorry for myself, because that's how I play the game, right? So in our containers, we interrupt that. Like, at the end of the day, if you went through a situation in life and grieved and expressed your pain and moved your pain, and then after you feel alive, you feel resourced, you feel like you've learned something, you feel powerful, then what's the use of continuing to perpetuate a story that you have been this and this and that and it was unfair? Like, that's it, it's gone, it's moved, it's transformed. But people will resist this so strongly. What are you asking me to drop my identity as a whatever abuse, as a blah blah blah, financial abuse, sexual abuse? I can't do that. That's too scary. Well, that's exactly, like, we hold people's hands exactly to bring them to those scary places that are alive, because we've seen again and again and again that when you remove the opinion and feel all the feelings, that you get to a different place. And I just want to say, just as a PS, oftentimes we speak about victims, but what about the incredible work that I'm just gonna toot my own horn for a minute, to help to help the recovery of addictive saviors? That's another addiction as well. Like, can you have righteous anger about the injustice that you see in the world? Of course, that's powerful, that's alive, let's move it together, let's see it in community. But once that's moved through you, and maybe you get to a place of sadness, or to a place of just wanting to rest and be held, a professional savior cannot do that. They need to pick up the sword. Their identity is tied to that. And that's why they will never be satisfied. It's very dangerous for someone that identifies as a savior to get to a place of going like, oh, great, those changes that people made around me are satisfactory. I can drop the sword for a moment. I can have a cup of tea. No, that's anathema. So, being stuck in the savior place is equally as damaging as being stuck in the victim place and the persecutor as well. So we try to help all those stuck places to just become pure feeling, embodied emotion, maybe community reflection and mirror as well. That's also very powerful. And then see where that gets somebody. And it gets them to the most interesting places if they're willing to drop the opinion for a moment.
Yeah, beautiful. A number of things you shared I really appreciate, and I just envisioning and knowing so many times when people come into one of these containers for a week and they have these ahas and they're feeling in their body and they're present in their emotion, and then they're feel like they've touched upon this whole new realm of being, and it's something, of course, without any plant medicine or any type of substance, and then they meet back into their world, and it's like, I think that the integration journey of that is often the most challenging in a sense, because people tap into their infinite, divine nature with a community of others. It's like going back into life, like, whoa, but I'm supposed to be a victim. I'm supposed to do this. Oh, that was really bad, that thing that happened. And then it's like this perpetual cycle. Then if there are these, the professional saviors around them, they're like, really, that was a bad thing that you've gone through. And I feel like this is the this is the rubber meeting the road into creating new pathways. And almost from what I hear you saying, it's like there's not necessarily a solution when there's such a strong identification on a collective global level to the savior, to people being in that role because they're getting the pat on the back of feeling like they're doing good work, because there's an entire culture of society that promotes that says, oh, that you're supposed to do that, you're supposed to help them because they're, help those in need. And it's not really a culture of true, embodied freedom, if you will.
I agree. Collectively, if you look at it collectively, it may sound like a lost battle because, as you say, there are so many cross incentives, right, to maintaining those relationships of power between victim and persecutor and savior at large. But then at the same time, and you and I have seen this again and again, once people individually or in relatively small groups do that journey, within a container that allows it and that celebrates it, like I have so many memories of people that came to one of our retreats really identified with a victim identity, and we held that tenderly, because that doesn't come out of nothing. That comes out of pain, that comes out of actual abuse, that comes out of suffering. But in very many cases, just to see that transformation, and I have words echoing and ringing in my ears that I've heard people say, and standing in the middle of a circle and say, that's it, I dropped this backpack today in front of all of you, and I declare, and even repeating that brings emotion to me, and I reclaim that I am a free agent. Doesn't matter what happened to me in my past, doesn't matter what my parents did to me or what my partners or whatever. I today, in this moment, I am alive and I am feeling and I am breathing and I feel power coursing through my body. So I am here. And to see, I'm mentioning this because while you're right, it's very difficult to shift that crystallized system, but it's also true that when individual people experience this transformation in an embodied way, kind of there is no turning back. So that's what gives me hope, because yes, it's it's a society, the one that we mostly live in, built on the pillars of victimhood and saviorhood and also persecutor identity. But then it's also true that when people have those transformational experiences, in a way, there's no turning point. So I do have great hope for this work.
And and I imagine, just to connect this to what your current journey's been the last couple of days, when a media team or someone reaches out to you, my sense is that there'd be a hope that they would want to personify and share the recognition of those embodied moments of freedom for someone, rather than this kind of sensationalized sexuality and the challenge of that. And I guess that comes back to, well, if I'm going to be someone writing a story about this, are people more interested to someone breaking free and knowing themselves as, inherently divine and not connected to all their baggage? Or is someone going to, more apt to read the sensationalized story of, oh, well, this happened and this happened? It's almost pulling them back into that. It's like the mindset of the both the writer and the reader, and what is going to collectively more sell to our global community of humans.
Yeah, thank you for that question. As you say, obviously it touches me deeply and personally, because I am often the one in our circles that says yes to the media, and wants to talk with media, knowing all the risks and the challenges. And what keeps me sane in a way in this sometimes very difficult and frustrating process is recognizing in the depth of my heart that the media is also human beings, like individuals like you and I, and what they do is the best that they can do according to their own values and incentives. So I am, in a way, what I'm tracking, particularly with this last episode, is less so it's not so much like the evil media mogul that says, oh, let's keep everybody stuck in a repetitive victimhood so then I can sell them more of my XYZ medicine. This is also, for sure, it happens with certain media outlets and huge media conglomerates. But in this case, it's more a very human person, a journalist, for instance, that comes with genuine curiosity and with genuine sort of like, willingness to understand something. But then when they are confronted with someone's pain or with a situation that is very, very liable to be interpreted in the victim triangle, drama triangle way, then the savior complex kicks in too hard, and this is not, I'm not saying this is a criticism. These are deep ingrained patterns. Like, what would I do, if I was called to engage with curiosity with a situation? Like, this happened to me as a couple counselor, for example. Occasionally, I was counseling a couple, and what I saw was so strongly pulling me into the direction of developing a lot of sympathy for one of those two and a lot of rejection for the other one, because I had identified person A as a victim and person B as a persecutor. And my savior was like kicking and screaming inside of my belly, and I think the best I could do in those situations was to remove myself and say, hey, I can't continue supporting you. I'm just not the right person in this moment. So we all have that, and it's coming from care. It's coming from love. It's coming from the desire to see a better world around us, a more fair world around us, perhaps more justice around us. The problem is, though, that for anybody who has done any amount of shadow work, inner work on a personal and on a collective level especially, you quickly realize that those lofty ideals of justice and fairness and how the world should be so that there isn't anymore any abuse, like, those have a place. But then the actual work of working with the messiness of the human being needs something way deeper than that, way more complex, way more rooted as well. It's not just an ideal now, it's rooted in human experience. And so it is painful to see that very, very few people, at least from the media world, are willing to go to those depths, and they rather prefer to stay up here, what's right, what's wrong, what should have been, and actually, of course, none of them has an experience in what it means to hold a container with people that are going through their humanness, because that's a very different experience. But we'll get there eventually.
There's hope. As I'm hearing you, what I'm listening to, and I love this part of you, that kind of the philosopher meeting embodied presence, is the kind of equanimous nature of recognizing, the journalists had they had a good outlet, and I can see the pros, I can see the con, and almost a very, there's a neutrality there's more of a divine intelligence and recognition of the pros and the cons that happen in every side of life, of in an archetypal framework. It's a bit more of the, let me witness without judgment. Let me just see the situation for what it is. Let me see, okay, they're doing their best, I'm doing their best. I'm gonna love them. I'm gonna open up the compassionate arms of my heart and just love these individuals the best I can, because that's where life is guiding me towards. And I guess the question for you is, in that place, and this also, I think, the segue to something I know that's very alive for you, is archetypes. It's like there's that archetype of the compassionate, loving one that's just witnessing without judgment, and then there's the times where it's like the healthy, strong, kind of sword needs to come out of truth, of alignment, of saying enough is enough. I'm putting my feet in the sand. The buck stops here. This, just as a person said, I'm releasing that backpack for last time. I'm letting that go. So where do you feel like these two worlds meet, especially in an archetypal framework, for a healthy representation of sacred sexuality, embodied freedom, soul work, landing on the planet, of witnessing without judgment and penetrating with like love and clarity?
Yeah, great one. So first of all, I want to say that I can only show up with some equanimity, for example, let's say towards the journalists, and because I've done, like, in the past 2 days, a ton of kicking and screaming and raging and calling them names, like with pillows. It's like that's where it comes from. That's where this sits on, like thank God, goddess, I have these tools to move, my feelings so they don't need to become hard-assed opinions, right? So many times someone's opinions are actually just crystallized feelings that didn't get to move. So I've done a ton of that, and I'll probably have to do more. So just that aside, so there's both parts in me. But I think you're pointing to something very beautiful that actually has been a deep inquiry for me. If we want to talk archetypal language, we could almost say you're pointing to this dichotomy between light masculine and dark masculine, like more, let's say in a healthy way, a light masculine that is higher chakras, heart, but not just the heart, but also the mind is so omnicomprehensive. The mind can understand and can go into the other person's opinion, even if it's opposite from ours. So that's like the light masculine in me and in others. And then the dark masculine, as you say, just goes like, I love you. And the way my love is expressed right now is by setting a firm boundary, telling you, no, you won't cross this line, or sometimes just telling you, fuck off, So that's a deep inquiry for me, because for many years in the field that we both share, I was considered and projected on, sometimes rightfully so, to be sort of like a more of a dark masculine embodiment. And I was known for my dark feedback, for my ruthless, sharp sword. And I enjoyed it, and it was a beautiful reflection of a part of me that's actually really true and alive. And then at some point around midway through my journey in this collective, I started feeling constricted by it. I started feeling that I was adopting an identity that didn't allow my true, genuine heart compassion to flow so well, for example, as one of the characteristics, but also that didn't allow so much healthy doubt in me to exist. I was into this habit of being sure of what I said, sure of what I did, and like very, which I think served myself and served my field very well in a way, but it also needed to give way to another part of me that's also there. So right now, however, fast forward, I find myself maybe at the end of another cycle where for the last 2 or 3 years, oftentimes I've embodied this archetype of equanimity, of like omni-comprehension and omni-considerateness. And then I'm starting to see also the seams, the cracks at the seams of it, and some beautiful friends and peers, even in our retreats, it's already been a year, give me this reflection, Rafa, I love you. I love how patient you are. And I'm kind of missing your sword a bit, where's that gone? So it's like, oh, thank you for that. And at the end of the day, like many other people, I'm continuously dancing between opposites and taking these reflections and then going like, wait a minute, does it land? Am I actually perhaps silencing a part of me? Oh yeah, that lands. Okay, what can I do about it? So I feel I'm really very much in that dance that you're mentioning of light masculine, dark masculine. And right now, if I had to describe my own process, it's where after having spent the last 3-4 years more in the light masculine, sort of like equanimous archetype, I can feel some of my sword and not sting, but just like, don't fuck with me coming up again. So let's see, I'll vibrate it, I'll feel it, I'll see where it wants to go. And I'll never claim that I have all these archetypes fully accessible and fully sort of like, fully developed and flourished at any given moment in time. At any given moment in time, me as everybody else, I will always be slanted towards somewhere. My masculine, my feminine, my light, my dark, and the only kind of balance that I can actually see for a human being is a dynamic balance. It's like
Mhm.
continuously course correcting, and taking in reflections from the world and from community, and dancing with that. So I think you're pointing to something really good. I took it more to my personal. I'm also happy to comment that more on a collective level, but I'm gonna pause here for a moment.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I appreciate your weaving and recognition of the sword, kind of the necessity to bring it back in and into your awareness. It's a great awareness. I guess the deeper inquiry I'd love to look at is like in leadership. One of the things I really love to focus on this show is on how we as facilitators, as teachers, as embodied leaders get to lead by example and get to do that. And I hear that in what you're sharing. And I guess in the place of both archetypes and leadership, where is your new edge you're moving towards in terms of leading others effectively towards a deeper integration, leading others on a mass group level, as well as potentially in the facilitation role. I have a thing I'm just about to be launching actually with a fellow colleague of ours, Brianna, about like advanced facilitation and how people can step up more as facilitators and really read the field more congruently, both inside the space as well as outside the space, tying together all of these different pieces we've been talking about around, the philosophy and the evolution of wisdom, around the archetypes, around, the victim, and where's your edge that you're leaning into in the realms as a facilitator, something you're holding many retreats and groups, throughout the year, same as myself, more focused around ISTA. But where's your edge that you're moving to as a leader of this work, both in the group space as well as outside the group space?
Thank you. Beautiful, deep question. What's coming up? And I haven't prepared this, of course, so just going with what's alive. My edges are, in a way, they are related to each other. And so one of them is really how hard it is for me to let go of the desire to be to please everybody, to not hurt anybody. And that's like the shadow side of the equanimity that you were noticing before. I've been dancing with this for years, but and I do believe it's a real truth, like an uncomfortable truth for me, but a real truth, that nothing of significance can be done in this world without hurting, pissing off quite a large number of people.
Mm-hmm.
But it's simple to say it, but for me to actually breathe and embody this is very, very hard. Because there is a deep part of me that still hopes that, but at the end, everyone will agree that the thing that I did was a good one. I know it's not going to happen, but that hope there is tricky for me. It's a tricky one. Connected to that, and this is also a reflection that I received lately in one of my last trainings from a beautiful colleague, is that one of the consequences of that in my facilitation / leadership style, you could say, has been a facilitation and leadership style that that can tend to be very perfect. Like everything is done top-notch quality with lots of preparation, with lots of work behind the scenes. But then where do I take risks? Where do I actually jump into something in leadership or in facilitation where I fuck up, or there is a high possibility for me to fuck up? Mm-hmm. And I have to say, though, that this edge of risking and fucking up is very, very present for me in my leadership work that I do for ISTA, in being on the council, in interfacing with other organizations, but not so much in my facilitation. And I know that if I don't sort of track that, it could lead to being, perfectly sort of stagnating. One of the and one of the outcomes of that deep reflection for me was to launch a new offer of my own without anybody, just me, on archetypes, on an embodied retreat on archetypes, because that's a full-on area of risk, and of newness and of messiness. But it's an edge. It's an edge for me, because again, the part of me that wants to do it in such a way that everyone will be happy is very good at creating systems, very good at polishing, very good at perfecting the art, and sometimes it can go into the shadow of not taking risks.
Yeah,
I
I
would say
love
those are
that.
my two edges.
The people pleaser and the not taking risks. Thank you for that. Yeah, I can reflect in my own world with, ISTA is one of the schools I teach with. And I think one of the intentions I had several years ago is recognizing I liked having a variety of different curriculum that kind of I get to meet, week after week or month to month in different groups and things. So that kind of puts me in my own intellectual curiosity, as well as the eyes of meeting it from a new place, so I can appreciate the place of, okay, you're often delivering a similar curriculum where there could be a very fine-tuned polishing, and also, the risk of leading a group of humans that are all kind of renegade uh, believers of whatever it is that they want, that all have your strong opinions. It's a remarkable trait. I can think back to the last time that all of us got together in Italy, and it's there's a part of me that has such a love-hate for it. It's like I have this love of this life force that just pulses, and the fact that we're in Italy with so much aliveness and personality, and yet there's this other part that's like, oh my God, it's just this like swirling winds of thoughts and ideas and projections and all of it. I find in my own place this kind of pushing, pulling into the realms of it, and still continuing to show up because I love the work, and through it all, I love the humans inside of it all. So yeah, and the recognition that it does take a certain risk to show up as we do, to show up as you do. The last question I'd love to just briefly hear your thoughts on is, in my own life, having a partner who's in this world but not totally in this world. I'd love to just hear briefly, like, how you feel like you work your personal life with, traveling, teaching, doing all of this, and find some level of sanity in your personal life and professional life, where you feel like you can find some kind of balance. A couple of tools or tips to support people who might be having similar challenges, or anything that comes alive for you in that.
So my experience, and obviously this is not everyone's experience, but my experience is that this crazy life that you talk about, so being immersed in so many transformational containers and then teaching them and then traveling, yes, it has, created challenges for my personal and relational life, for example, like, just for example, couple life. Yes, it has created challenges, but it has given me tools and inside work that far, far outweigh the challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
that same lifestyle that some people say, like, how can you possibly have a healthy relationship with that lifestyle? And then I have a healthy relationship because of that lifestyle. I have a
Mm-hmm.
healthy relationship today that is extremely supportive, that is so amazing, so grounded, so deep, because of all the turmoil that I have put myself through, and that my partner, independently of me, in her own life before meeting me, and has put herself through.
Mm-hmm.
So, honest, hand on heart, what I can say to everybody is, oh, you want to have a great relationship? Well, start working on yourself as deeply, as sort of like intensely. And I know people don't like this word intensity, but what can I tell you? For me, intensity has been the medicine. So
Mm-hmm.
will your perfect relationship drop out of a tree without you doing any self-work? I highly doubt it. I highly, highly doubt it. It's possible, it happens in the movies, but I highly doubt it. It's not how it worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say, yeah, that's the tip. The tip is what I really came to realize, Aaron, this was a very big realization for me about a year ago, when I was, hey, how come I have a serene relationship, a relationship that works? What are the tips? What are the tricks? Can I maybe write a relationship course? And then I realized I can't. I can't. You know why? Because 80% of why my relationship works, 80% of it depends on the individual work that me and the other person have done by themselves. So it's not so much about the communication tools that we have. It's not so much about the relationship tricks or coaches. Yeah, that helps. But really, it's how do we come to a relationship? Do we come with having done some shadow work? Do we come with having an awareness of our inner feminine and inner masculine both? Do we come with having tools that we use to move our emotions when we're triggered? If not, I think it's a very hard one. I think it's a very hard one.
Yeah, fair enough. Beautiful. Beautiful, brother. Well, I'd love if you'd love to share about the upcoming offering you're doing, and I know it's something around archetypes. So you're welcome to anything else that people should find out more about you, or where they, outside of the ISTA containers, where they can find out more about Raffaello.
Sure, great. So everything is on my website, which is my name, my given name, Raffaello.life. The three things that are happening this year that are very exciting are 2 masterclasses, one on archetypes and one on money. And particularly, I'm excited about both, but particularly about the one on money, because this is another sort of like, edge that finally came aligned. And it's like, yes, now it's time to share a shamanic understanding of money with my audience. So super excited about both of them. They're on my website. And then in September 12th to 17th in Sicily, I have Arche. Arche is an embodied sort of like in-person container, all dedicated to the embodied exploration of archetypes, what we also call the transpersonal field. What happens when we co-create together a transpersonal field for 5-6 days, and what kind of magic happens there? So we'll have ceremonies, rituals, temples that are all dedicated to that. So this is for people that have already done some amount of personal work, ideally 1 or more ISTA level 1s or similar, and that are ready to cross into the next ring, into the transpersonal ring.
Amazing. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you for walking this path, for leading as you do, and just being, very transparent as well in your journey and the pieces you're moving through. It's been a beautiful, inspiring, and joyful conversation. Thank you, brother, for being here and doing the work you're doing.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate you. I see you, love you, and thank you for being such a great interviewer. I didn't know this about you, so thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you, everyone. Please subscribe, tune in to another conversation with Love, Sex, and Leadership, and have a beautiful day. Thank you.